This podcast is sponsored by Logos Bible Software. If you've been longing for the tools to take your Bible study deeper, you need to try out Logos. I've been personally using Logos for over a decade now for both my devotional and pastoral study. Right now, Logos has partnered with the Kingdom Dreamers to bring you exclusive savings. Check out at logos.com/Kingdom Dreamer or click the link in the show notes for our exclusive offer.
As I have a dream, and staggered by the winds of police brutality, you have been the veterans of creative suffering.
The ballot or the bullet
is to either ignore them or to deny them without giving details.
And we stand together to win the war.
One small step for man. Yes, we can. Can we all get along?
It's crazy out here.
Let's go.
Welcome to the Wild Wild World Show. Back another week in the chaos of the cosmos. This is the show about conscious Christian conversation about chaos in the cosmos, and there's a heck of a lot of it right now. So Will and Kellen are back. Kellen, how you doing over there, man?
Good, but I feel like it's been a hectic week, hectic time, hectic couple weeks. Even our pre-show conversation is talking about some heavy topics. So I'm like, look, we got to make sure we bring the energy right now because we are excited to be here with y'all. This Kingdom Dreamer podcast, we're happy to be here with y'all. Wild, wild world. I'm doing okay as well as I can be with everything that's going on in the world. I'm not quite as down in the dumps as I was last week. Not quite as stressed. I think I shared with y'all, there were times I hadn't been sleeping. Like I'm getting better. I'm sleeping more. I'm getting a little bit back to normal. But we know the world is not normal right now, and we don't want the world to get back to normal because normal wasn't working. But I'm here. I'm glad to be here with you, my brother, and glad to chop it up about things that's on the agenda this week, man. But before we do that though, I gotta check in with you. Self-care. Like, how are you doing, Will? Are you okay? Share.
I don't know how much I can share on the airways. I mean, I'm all right. I'm doing all right.
Okay.
It's been an interesting week. I can say that.
Okay.
Challenges are there, but I'm doing pretty good, relatively speaking. Putting it all back in perspective. Always nice to chop it up on here.
Hey, for real.
So you know what it is, but hey, y'all can support us patreon.com/Kingdom Dreamers. Also check out kingdomdreamer.com. Find us everything there. Twitter, the whole nine. Y'all know what it is.
Know what it is.
But we're going to go, because we're in the literal chaos of the cosmos, we're going to do another episode, a little bit old school for you. The segments and things will come back. They're not going away forever, but there's just these heavy topics that deserve full conversations, or maybe if they don't deserve it, they need it, unfortunately, which is kind of where we're at today.
That's a couple weeks, man.
Yeah, that's true. But this one feels like it's sad we have to do this, but we got to do this.
Yeah.
So today what we're going to do is have a conversation around the very widely shared video that you don't need to watch. You don't need to add to the nonsense, but your girl Candace Owens shared a video that got like 45 million views in the first 24 hours. And the reason we need to talk about it is because everybody and their mom has texted to me like a source that systematic racism against Black America doesn't exist. And that's highly problematic on multiple levels. I don't know, Kellen, I don't know what your experience with this video has been. Maybe it's different. I don't know.
So we getting right into this, huh? We going right in, no Vaseline.
I mean, I don't know.
Right into all right, let's go. No, let's get it.
You got to do it, man.
I thought we were gonna warm up to it, but we're diving right in.
I've seen so much of it this week, man. I don't need any warm up. Like it's been sitting here. It's pent up.
We're not preheating the oven. We putting that turkey right in. All right. Well, you asked my experience. I mean, so I'll be real with y'all. Initially, this was not something I had any desire to talk about on the show. And the reason being is because I ignore whatever Candace Owens has to say. 99 times out of 100. Actually, wasn't that long ago. It was only a couple weeks ago. I had fallen back into my old ways and was getting into an internet argument with somebody. And I don't remember the context. It was something, they were saying some racist nonsense or whatever, right? Trying to act like they were. And they quoted, they put a Candace Owens quote out to try to prove whatever point. And I told them, I said, look, if you try to prove your point to me using Candace Owens, you already told on yourself. I ain't listening to nothing else you got to say. Right? And so for me, that was the end of it. I'm like, okay, this is where you are. So you asked my experience with this. As I told you pre-show, the reality is I've seen more conversation about the video, or put it this way, I've seen more backlash to the video than conversation about the video itself, right? Like in my social circle, whatever, I haven't really encountered people sharing it, you know, whether it's on social media. Nobody's definitely sending to me and said, see, this makes sense. I've seen people being like, Candace Owens is an idiot. Why would you share? You know, like I've seen that element of things. So that's been my personal experience. And so I knew she made this video. I hadn't paid attention to it because I said, okay, it's Candace Owens. I know she's going to say some out-of-pocket nonsense that I don't need to listen to anyway because I already know what she is and who she is, which, look, I ain't going to put the cart in front of the horse. I ain't even going to get into all that. But that's the answer to your question, Will. That's my
I've seen a little bit of both. I've seen, quite a bit of my network being like, yeah, this is ridiculous. Here's why. But I've seen far more than I like in people taking this as authoritative. And maybe that's because I'm white and I'm in a lot of white circles, I guess, as well. So it might be that.
No, that's honestly, as you were talking, that's what I was thinking. Like, this is an interesting thing for Wild Wild World here, right? Because the reality is, well, you are white. You got more white people in your circle, in your world than I do. I have a diverse world or whatever, but my family is Black. Like, it's different. And I've often said, or I shouldn't say, I've often believed, I don't know how often I'll talk about this, but the people that listen to Candace Owens are, the vast majority of them are white folks. Because Candace Owens, and just for the record, I'm not going to spend too much time denigrating Candace Owens as a person, right? Because I'm somebody, I try to believe that it's not the messenger, it's the message, right? So as we get into this, we're going to talk about the things she said, and we're going to offer our rebuttals and whatnot about the words that came out of her mouth, right? So I'm not going to spend too much time talking about she's this, she's that, or whatever. But because, well, you did mention people have been sharing this with you, right? Because I wouldn't be shocked if some of our listeners have seen this video and either thought that she made a lot of sense or that some of the points she made were good. So that's why we feel like it's important to do this. But just know, Candace Owens is the token Negro. She is her entire role, the entire reason she exists as a public figure is to be the Black person that says the thing that white people can't say, because if white people said it and somebody else has said it, they will be deemed as racist. She's the person that gets out there and says the thing that a lot of folks think in their head, but they can't say out loud, right? And then they can point to Candace Owens and say, see, a Black person said it, so it's not just me. See, a Black person said it, even one of your own, so it must be true. Or see, this is a Black person. Here's what I hear often. This is a Black person that isn't about the hive mind, that doesn't do groupthink, that hasn't bought into the lies that the left has fed Black people. So what you're basically saying is 99% of Black folks all think one way. 99% of Black folks are all brainwashed. And this is the one person wise enough to think differently on the subject matter. And it just so happens that this is the person that you choose to listen to, right? Yeah. And I say her audience is 99% white because Black folks don't go for this nonsense she says. And no, we don't all think alike, but there are things that she says in this video and just in general that are so blatantly false that you can't say this stuff to an audience of Black people because we all know it's a lie. The only people that believe that are either people with racist ideologies or they are non-Black people that don't interact with Black people, or at least that aren't in tune at all of what the quote-unquote Black community or Black people think about social issues or whatever. Because she says things that you just, if you've been around Black folks or the Black community at all, you just know it's not true, right? We don't even have to pull facts out. We know they're lies. But to the people that are in predominantly white or non-black areas that have opinions on these things that don't actually have any experience. She can speak to you, and you might think it's true. So, anyway.
Well, so most of the people. So, I guess I've had nobody black has shared it with me. So that has been whites, and then some are not white but not black as well. But I think what's interesting, because we don't want to, I guess before we jump into really breaking down what she said in the video, I think you make a good point, right? We're not here to attack people per se. We want the things that people say we want to put in the right place. But she's an interesting character because of what she's done historically, right? So the first time somebody shared this video with me, right? I didn't even watch the video, and I was like, I bet I can guess her script. And I got it pretty close before watching the video, right?
Me too.
It's because she's done this before. So, I mean, and some of the people who shared it with me had never heard of her. So that's fine if they didn't know the history. But the history on her is she's kind of only recently risen to popularity during the Trump administration, really, right? In 2015, she, I believe that's when she started with this Turning Point USA, which is really a far right, if not alt-right group, right? But she said she was apolitical, or not apolitical. She wasn't with either like political party or something like that. But then in 2017, she really made this shift to being like with the Trump administration and constantly sharing videos, almost as like a political pawn for whatever the far right view is.
Yeah, and you're even speaking it lightly. Well, I mean, there's evidence.
I'm speaking lightly, yes.
Well, yeah, I'm saying there's evidence that she was the editor or the creator of an anti-Trump website some years ago, right? This is the same woman that has said things like racism doesn't exist anymore because I'm not a slave. And also she called the NAACP, I don't remember the exact quote, but essentially a hindrance to the progress of black people. That in and of itself is a ridiculous statement. But she said that after the NAACP helped her with a suit that she filed in
2007,
for racism. So she got the NAACP's help to file a suit against some people for doing things she called racist. And now, when there's money involved, when she, is on TV, she's now saying, "Oh, racism doesn't exist," and the NAACP is bad. So she's so transparently a opportunist, a talking head, somebody that's being proper. It's extremely transparent to anybody that wants to take even a look. Now, that doesn't mean she's not saying things that people don't agree with. She is saying things that people agree with. I don't know how much she actually believes it. But whatever. The point is, she they say politics is kind of like sports now, right? People choose their side and they argue. It's like debate club. She is choosing a side to argue and debate because that's where her bread is buttered. That's where the money is. And she goes full bore. And again, she's not, as we'll see in the video, she positions herself as talking to Black America. But she knows, and I hope you're smart enough, or you're now in tune enough to know and understand, she's not talking to Black America. She's talking to white people, presenting it as if she's talking to Black America, because Black America don't listen to nothing she has to say. So we should do better. She has completely distanced herself from Black America in many ways. And again, I'm not going to go into her life and all of that, but
because there's a lot.
Yeah, she is not a representative of Black America in the sense that she wants very little to do with Black America. So this whole, as we go through, if you see the video, she's speaking to white and non-Black America directly. Like this is the whole ploy. So I don't know if that's enough about her, but go ahead.
Probably not. I mean, that's the point, right? Is she's her history has shown us that she's playing herself as a political pawn, and it's working for her. She's clearly getting views, getting hype over it. So that should call you to question things right away, right? That's really the point. Is her history shows otherwise. Like she also claimed the NRA was a civil rights organization.
Yeah, she said some stuff.
But she said all sorts of wild stuff. We're not going to go into all the past.
Right, but what we're going to do is we're going to go through the video, not necessarily second by second, but we're going to go through the things that she said, and we're going to talk about them and discuss them. So regardless of who the messenger is, the message itself is wrong and incorrect. So we're going to break that down. And so as we do this, again, we don't necessarily want to give her nonsense video views, but if you want to follow along, find some third party that just reposted it or something. So, you can see this all for yourself. And then, please, as I do encourage y'all, feel free to email us, DM us, whatever. Reach out to us if you got some thoughts or, things to say about it. If you disagree with us, agree with us, whatever, be a part of the conversation here. And I think, I might have mentioned before, but the reason we're doing this, normally I don't engage in stuff like this. Normally in my personal life, I just say, hey, if you really care about this issue, do your own research, look at it, read up on it. It's not that hard. You could spend a couple hours in the evening before you go to bed, and you could read, a couple of articles in the Atlantic, you know what I mean? And get a little bit of education on some of these issues like police brutality and whatnot. Because it's all so easily out there and readily available. So typically I say, look, if all you're doing is sharing a Candace Owens video, you're not serious because you don't actually care about this issue. You're just finding some talking head that says things that you already agree with. But did figure, hey, look, we want to have this rebuttal out there so that, even if you're a person that is kind of in agreement with us, if you see somebody share this, hey, feel free to share this, either the video or the podcast with somebody.
Save you typing so much in the comment section.
Right. So, we figured it's important to do. So this is probably the only time I really interact with this Candace Owens video. But, we're going to go ahead and do it, Will. So if I gag a few times in the background, y'all just ignore me. It's
understandable.
Yeah. It's a very bitter dish we're about to have here. So go ahead, bro.
Well, I guess that's, I don't know if we want to go point by point, but let's start automatically with the premise that she tries to build it off of, right? Mm-hmm. That because I forget what it's actually, this is in the title of it or something like that, but she doesn't believe that George Floyd should be celebrated as a martyr, is essentially what she says, right? Right away, I'm not sure she understands what the word martyr means, right? So to be a martyr means you willingly lay down your life as opposed to rejecting usually a religious belief or some type of belief, right? You die for a cause willingly. George Floyd did not die for a cause. He was murdered. That's very different than being a martyr, willingly lay down your life. He did the opposite. He cried for his life while it was taken from him. Right. So the first premise right off the bat is problematic, right? That misses what the whole point of protest, what all of it's about, right?
Most definitely.
Right. Nobody's saying he's a martyr. Not a single person has said that, right?
Not at all. No, not at all. It was one thing that's been unique about this situation, about the George Floyd killing versus the one, all the myriad of killings that we've heard about over the past, say, 10 years, is that the character of George Floyd was not really even part of the discussion for the first solid week. It didn't need to be because his murder was so evident and clear. So when Candace Owens came out with this video, it's a false narrative. She's like you said, the whole purpose of the video that, I won't make him a hero or a martyr. That was never being done. She created this argument out of thin air, out of whole cloth, right? Yeah. People were saying we're going to acknowledge the man, we're going to remember the man, we're not going to let his death be in vain. But he was not deified or ever portrayed as a hero. The first thing I remember about hearing about George Floyd as a man in any way, shape, or form, as a human, as a person, right? Like personality-wise, was when Steven Jackson, the NBA player who grew up with him and was a friend of his, made the video saying, "Man, they killed my brother," right? And he said he moved to Minneapolis to find a better life, to start a better life, to kind of start fresh, right? Now, we all know what that means, typically. Things ain't been, the best where you are, and so you're relocating to find a fresh start. That's the very first thing I ever remember hearing about him as a person. So this whole, the premise of it is he's not only not a martyr, but he's not going to be our hero. That was an argument she created and then argued against. So from the jump, we're already off.
Yeah,
we're already left.
The whole foundation is already wrong, right?
Right.
Yeah, and it is crazy because this, we've typically seen with the pattern of police killings of black men in particular, it's usually quick to bring some discredit to what type of person they are. The fact that you had to really be the first one to pull this out after a week is highly questionable. That brings to the second part, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that qualifying a person's death by what they've done is just disgusting to begin with on any level you want to put it, in my mind.
Yeah.
Right? So it doesn't, this is what's crazy. It doesn't matter. Like, even if he was out here murdering people and stuff, in my mind, that doesn't mean that you justify anybody's death. That automatically means you just don't value human life. You don't see them in the image of God. But that's not even George Floyd, right? She goes off to read a list of whatever his rap sheet was, and most of them
we'll get to that. We'll
get to it? You got something to say with it?
Oh, well, look, that's later on. Go ahead.
I'm just saying, like, the first premise that you would even qualify something to say his death is okay, that's a highly questionable thing to do.
And she's very insidious here, because throughout the video she stops and multiple times says what Officer Chauvin did was wrong, and I'm not, and he should get whatever comes to him, and the family should get justice, and so I'm not defending him. She constantly says she's not defending the officer and that what he did was wrong, but she says that immediately after and immediately before she then says something else disparaging about George Floyd, which is designed to diminish the value of his life to make his death less meaningful, right?
Exactly.
And even still, a police officer's job is not to be judge and jury. Police don't sentence. Police aren't supposed to make judgments about somebody's guilt or innocence. They are supposed to arrest, or they are supposed to do a number of things. But a situation like this, when a crime has been committed, they are supposed to take a person into custody if need be, and then let the system handle it from there. So regardless of what he did, even if he was they came because he shot the shop owner, right? If he was unarmed and not a threat, to kill him in that way, or to kill him in general, and to kill him in that way was still uncalled for. There's nothing he could have done. In the 8 minutes of that video we saw where he never had a weapon, he wasn't resisting, nothing he could have done that would have called for that. Point blank, period. No matter, he could have been Hitler. And it's like that, for the police of Minneapolis, that is not their job. They did not do their job. And they did not do the job of protecting and serving. Right. And quite frankly, I still haven't heard if this so-called counterfeit money that he used was actually counterfeit or not. Right.
It was proven later that it wasn't.
That it wasn't.
But what I'm seeing. Yeah. So
okay.
The whole thing was based off of bogus premise.
Yeah. So just anyways, regardless of what he did, it doesn't matter. And she says that, but you can tell she doesn't mean it, because she again keeps harping on what he's done. Right. But anyway, go ahead.
So that, just on that point, right? Like, what she's doing is what's continually happened in white America. It's a way to ease the guilt of not dealing with all that's happened. It's just not, recognizing the history, the presence of systematic oppression, all these things, by saying, yeah, that's bad, but, right? So she follows the same logic. Like, she has non-logic, really, right? But there's a clear strategy with what she's doing, you know what I mean?
Right. And within that, and as we start going through the video, she also has a lot of things to say about the Black community in general, Black people, who I guess make up the Black community, because there's not really a white community, right? So at the minute 40 mark, she makes this statement. She says, the Black community is the only community that demands justice for essentially the lowest common denominator. Basically, we're the only community that demands justice for, in her mind or her eyes, the lowest of us, right? The criminals and those sorts of folks, right? And first off, I'd say, hey, good, we all should, right? We're Christians, right? Bible says we're supposed to demand justice and life and dignity for everybody, the widows, the poor, all of that, everybody, right? So great, thank you. That's a compliment. She presents it as a negative, right? That we are the other communities don't worry about the criminals and the troublemakers, right? that obviously ignores the entire element of systemic racism, which is what we're dealing with, right? That the Black community is subjected to more issues of over policing, poverty, poor education, all of these things that create the environments that lead to criminal behavior and activities, and even criminalization of non-criminal behavior and activities, that we're fighting against here, right? So that's kind of nonsense. But if you talk about Black folks demanding justice, part of that is because we all understand, well, not all, clearly, but many Black people, especially people that grew up in predominantly Black areas and neighborhoods around those sorts of things, we understand it's kind of that, but for the grace of God, there go I, right? We know, as a Black man who grew up in America, I know how easy it is to become a statistic. I know how easy it is to get caught up and go to jail, because you don't have to be doing that much, right? For all the various reasons we talked about, just the fact that we've created these hoods and ghettos through red line and all this. You don't have to stray too far off of the straight and narrow to be caught up. So yeah, we do have a lot of empathy for the quote unquote lowest of the lowest common denominator, people that have come out of jail, because we all know folks that have been to jail and came out or whatever, because we know how easy it is to get caught up there. So we know, because you went to jail doesn't mean that you're a bad person, doesn't mean that you're a bad guy, doesn't mean you had even bad intentions. Maybe you're a lifelong criminal, maybe you are a bad guy, maybe you are somebody that just constantly makes poor choices, but maybe not, right? And so yeah, Candace, we demand justice for those people, because these are people that the system has determined are the ones that can be thrown away. These are people the system determines are there to fill up the for-profit prisons, right? That's their job in our American economy and socioeconomic system, is to be that fodder. And so, yeah, we do stick up for them. But even that statement isn't true, right? Like, Black people have fought and been there fighting for all sorts of other disenfranchised groups. Just in Minneapolis, it's a few years ago, a woman named Justine Damon, I always mispronounce her last name, was killed by a police officer. This was the only time a police officer was convicted of killing somebody in Minnesota, and I think it was within the last 100 police killings. Just so happens Justine Damon was white. Not only white, I believe she was Australian, right? And not only that, the person that was convicted was a Black officer, right? And guess how I know that Black people were in the middle of that fight? Because my father, a Black man who was on the Wild Wild World a couple weeks ago, was in the middle of leading that fight for justice for her. So, and I know that this goes on all around the country. So it is not true that the Black community only cares about its low. No, we care about justice for everybody. I'm not saying that Black people should be deified and that we're that by nature of our Blackness, we're the greatest people. But no, as a group, as a collective, understanding that we have been denied justice for so long, in general, Black people and Black activists and fighters and people that fight for justice typically do so along all fronts. Because we understand, hey, if a woman like Justine Damon can be killed by the police, and if nothing happens to that officer, then we are truly screwed too. So we're always fighting for justice. And lastly, and I'll let you hit on it, Will, I did just want to point out too, it's also not true that only Black people demand justice for the lowest common denominator. Because as I mentioned before, there are many, many stories out there of Black men being killed, murdered, hung up, lynched, in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s for doing so little as like whistling at white women, poor white women, right? So it's not only Black people that demand justice for the poor and destitute in society, because for years the one thing that poor white folks had was that they were better than Blacks, and if a Black person committed anything that they deemed as disrespectful to a white person, it was a death sentence, an absolute death sentence. So none of that nonsense is true. Go ahead, Will. I'm sorry. You're gonna get me ranting on this, so I'm sorry.
That's where I want to go. No, I was just gonna add to your previous point. We even just saw, even within this Wild Wild World season, tons of Black people writing for discrimination against Asian Americans during COVID-19. Much of that collective that we had on the very first episode of the season is partnered with by Black people because of the understanding of needed justice, discrimination, these type of things. So to say, black people only ride for black people. That's an awful, crazy generalization with no backing. You know what I mean?
Right. We're the ones always talking about black and brown and all those sorts of things. Even to the point where, again, we had those conversations earlier in the season where I was at times saying, how deep we want to go with some of this, right? And I've come around and I've seen a lot of our Asian brothers and sisters riding with us, and just riding with justice too. I won't just say with us recently as well, but there was a lot of black folks that, you know, when the racism was hitting the fan with the COVID-19, that were purposely going and supporting Asian businesses and things, and specifically Chinese businesses and whatnot. So yeah, that's a good point you make there, Will. Moving on to the next comment or phrase at the 3-minute mark. Well, actually, we already kind of talked about this. She says again that George Floyd was made a hero, which again, that's a false narrative. Never happened, right? At the 3:25 mark, she says George Floyd was not an amazing person. Which, I mean, look, that's just rude, right? Like,
that's what. Yeah, it's just like, in my mind, that's just disgusting. Because again, it comes off the premise of you, in some way, shape, or form, think you can qualify the value of someone's life based on how amazing, whatever that means, you deem it.
Right.
Like, that's utterly nonsense, just in normal human dignity, but especially to the Christian, that should be utter nonsense, right? If we're creating the image of God, to say anything remotely like that, that's crazy.
It's ridiculous. And let's break it down just a step further, right? Just Candace Owens is like through this whole time she's talking essentially about law and order, right? Later she says, how hard is it to not be a criminal, to not do this, that, and other, right? So if we extrapolate that, right? People that are typically very much on that law and order scale, we're about following the rules, yada, yada. You went to jail because you deserved it, right? What is it that people are supposed to do when they get out of jail? Right now, we know that we have, or at least you should know. If you don't know, read a book or an article or something. We know that recidivism is high in this country. When you go to jail, especially as a felon, when you're put in the system, it is hard to get out and stay out because of all the factors that are playing against you, right? So George Floyd had some convictions, some different things he was dealing with, the vast majority of them for drugs and whatnot, right? Not even drug crimes, not even distribution. I think a couple times one of them was like less than an ounce of cocaine or something, like just stuff like that, right? And when you get out of jail, what should you do? We talk about turning your life around, right? We love to, especially conservatives, love to celebrate people that turn their lives around. Oh, well, they did that time, and now all of that nonsense. All evidence points to the fact that George Floyd, since he's been released from jail, or over the past couple of years, and since he moved to Minneapolis, has been involved in different volunteer projects. He's volunteered at church, volunteered in different community organizations, worked with young people in a basketball league that he kind of helped start, trying to help people do better, right? So by all accounts, he's been doing positive things for his community. By all accounts, everything we've heard of, and again, we all know that if there's any negativity, it's going to come out, just like everybody's pulling out his record, right? By all accounts, everybody has talked about him like, hey, he's a good guy, right? Even the people in Minneapolis that didn't know him for 40 years or whatever, they only known him for a couple of years, say, hey, he's a good guy. On the radio, there was a podcast on The Athletic where they brought David Aldridge brought in some different folks from the Twin Cities area, and there was one brother whose name is leaving my mind, who's respected around the area. He's been on KMOJ, which is a local black run station, and he was saying he also does a class, essentially they train truck drivers, and George Floyd was in his class training to be a truck driver. And he basically said, he was a good guy. He was like he showed up, he was respectful, that like he was trying to do his best or whatever. Like, you didn't have nothing ill to say about the guy, and we haven't really heard anything negative about him as a person, other than people pointing out those things he was convicted of. And we're not co-signing, any violent crime or anything like that. But to say, well, he wasn't he wasn't an amazing person. He seems like the person that's doing everything he's supposed to do for the most part since being locked up. And, maybe he might have had some drugs in his system. But look, we know obviously he's been dealing with drug issues for a long time. And so anyways, I don't even want to get into the thing about how good of a person he is. And it's just disgusting, like you said, to come out there and disparage his character after all of that.
Right. Yep. No, that's exactly. That's why it's just that part alone really I don't know, when people who claim Christianity share that with me, like it shows you really where your thoughts about the world are. They're not shaped by the gospel, not at all.
Oh.
So,
did they deserve what happened to them based on their history?
Yeah, it's it's a disgusting narrative to build in the fact that it's even could be in something like this. It's just there's no arguments to make against it. That's just disgusting.
There's no compassion, no empathy, no love, no anything.
No value of life, just straight value of life is not there.
Right. Exactly. So what's the next thing we want to break down? Well, I got a couple of things. We kind of talked about them already.
How far are you in the video?
I'm skipping ahead. Well, right there that was at the 3:25 mark. My next thing I wanted to skip ahead to, because I think she talked about his criminal record at this point, which is stuff we've already kind of talked about. Or am I missing something?
No, so pretty early on she talked about his criminal record and whatnot.
Okay. Yeah, so I wanted to jump ahead to 8:40, right? Where she makes a statement that the black culture is broken and we want to martyr criminals, right? We want to martyr criminals. Now, that's a wild statement. She obviously she provides no like facts or statements or anything to back that up. It's just, it's just something she throws out there, right?
Yeah.
And you already talked about martyring, right? No, when the police kill somebody, they're not a martyr, as you mentioned. I'll reiterate, black folks haven't martyred any of these people. Not really. Because the point is not to deify them. And I don't think people in general have tried to do that. They have said that these people did not deserve to die. And we're going to say their name and remember them because we don't want those deaths to be in vain. Right? So we try to humanize them. Hey, these are people. And it's just not black people. This is everybody that is on the side of justice. These are human beings that did not deserve to die at the hands of those who are sworn to protect them. Right? Yeah. And that's what it is. Whether it's Sandra Bland, Philando Castile, all these names that you know, right? Mm-hmm. We're not deifying people, right? We're understanding people are people. And we're saying that those people, the police who are charged with going out and dealing with people, right? I often hear, oh, well, they deal with the criminals and the worst of the worst and blah, 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 blah. They get hardened. No, I'm sure that's part of the job, sure. But your job is to deal with people. The people in the community, right? And they're people. They're gonna be flawed. Some might have some sort of record. Some might not. Some might have an attitude. Like your job, you don't get a pass because the people you deal with aren't perfect angels all the time, especially when they're dealing with police in a high stakes or kind of high stress moment. But I did say on a level though, she is right? And I say she's right because there are some criminals that we do martyr, right? Martin Luther King, he went to jail a few times. Is he a criminal? Malcolm X, definitely had criminal history, right? Plenty other black civil rights leaders spent plenty of nights in jail.
Nelson Mandela spent a long time in jail.
Yeah, he's a criminal. So there's a lot of criminals that we do deify in the black community, right? And in general, in the world, a lot of criminals that we deify and that we show love to. Mark Wahlberg, people been talking about him. He's a criminal. You know what I mean? What's my man name from Home Improvement? Tim Allen.
Tim Allen.
Yeah, he's a criminal. We did. So I mean, I'm just throwing stuff out there. I'm being silly, but it's nonsense, and that goes to. And she didn't go here, but people like to say that about like the hip hop, we deify rap and violence and all that nonsense. And actually, she mentioned it later. So, matter of fact, I probably shouldn't get too far ahead of myself here. But
it's hard to do in order because it all weaves together.
I know she says a lot of nonsense. We try to do it in order. She said, yeah, but I'll pause on that. We'll get to some of that stuff she talks about a little bit later. But I don't know. Do you have anything to say on this?
This is around the same point she says this, and it ties to what you're saying. It's the same thing with I guess I don't know how to tie it, but she talks about right around that same area about then blacks are apparently deifying criminals, right? Mm-hmm. So one, what does it mean to be a criminal, which was your point. And then she gives some stat with absolutely no source, and I haven't been able to find a source for it, about blacks committing a disproportionate amount of crime, right? And she says, yeah,
she's talking about black people are 13% of the population, and therefore black men are 6% of the population, and we commit like
44% of murders. That's what she says, right?
Something like that.
I can't find I can't find the stat anywhere. Two, that's crime stats. We have to understand how they work because we like to throw out stats all the time, but we don't actually put them in their actual context, right?
Mm-hmm.
All the crime stats from the FBI, the things that you can look up crime stats on, which don't have these numbers, right? They're going based off of arrest, not convictions, right? So right there, automatically, that could actually help prove the point that blacks are arrested more, but that doesn't mean there's more crime, right?
Right.
So you're doing, you're really mixing up two different things with that, right? And it's the same thing with, even when you think about convictions, right? We think about the Central Park 5, right, which has been big with the docu movie that Ava did, When They See Us, right? That you can be convicted and innocent. That's the points that all of this is trying to get to, right?
Well,
go ahead. Well, I was going to say that's just the point that, you're really pointing back to the whole reason any of these protests are starting, because there's a system that is already criminalizing being black. In general.
And let's just briefly talk about that criminal justice system. And I think if you want an easy way to digest this, I believe they were doing DuVernay's documentary, The 13th, talks about some of this a little bit. It's been a while since I've seen it. I think it does. But the whole criminal justice system, when we talk about convictions, is set up to convict people too, right?
Yeah.
Very, very few percentage, a small percentage of the people of the, how can I say this? A small percentage of the people that are charged with crimes like felonies actually take those things to trial, those cases to trial, because the system is literally set up in a way to tell you not to do so. Most of them take plea deals, right? So what we've done in the war on drugs, since the 80s, is we slap these huge long sentences on so many of these nonviolent crimes, right? Drug-related crimes. And we said, hey, look, especially depending on, if you've had 2 or 3 convictions, but hey, look, it could be your first time. You had, half a couple ounces of weed on you, or some cocaine, or whatever it happens to be, or that they claim you had on you. And you can take it to court if you want. If you're convicted, the max sentence here is 15 years, and the judges like to give close to the max sentences to those that are convicted. Or you could just plead this down. You could take this deal, plead guilty, and you'll serve 18 months, including time served. Not only that, but usually if you want to take it to court, take it to trial, you're going to be in jail unless you can afford bail, which bail, a lot of times, again, poor black folks often can't afford bail, right? So you're going to sit in jail for 6 months to a year to 2 years awaiting trial, where if you don't win, you're gonna get slapped with a long sentence. So most people say, look, I don't want to spend the next 2 years of my life waiting to possibly get sentenced, so they'll plead down. It might be, I think it's something, I've heard the number even as low as 5%. I haven't researched this recently. It might be only 5% of cases go to court. And guess what? The courts are still overworked, even with that number, right? So when we say judges give harsh sentences, is it unreasonable to say that part of the reason that harsh sentences are given down is to discourage people from going to trial in the first place, because our system literally can't handle people going to trial? If everybody said, if everybody charged with a felony tomorrow said, nope, we're all going to trial, the system would absolutely collapse, right? So when we talk about these stats and these numbers and convictions and whatever, right, we know for a fact, and this is bleeding into kind of her next point, that police brutality is a myth, right? But there are documented facts that black people, and I'll just stick to black and white right now, that black people are pulled over for traffic stops more frequently and with less actual reason behind it, right? Evidence behind the cause than white people. Even still, white people are still typically more they are more likely when the car is searched to have something in the car than black.
Twice as likely. Yep. Twice as likely, according to
actually have something when they are stopped, right? Yeah. But those stops for black people are more likely to result in arrests and charges somehow, some way. So we over-criminalize black folks. We stop them more often for less reason. We charge them more often, right? We know that in general, black people are, again, as a whole, in general, have less money, are lower on the economic scale than the white people in general. So it's more likely that these black people that are charged with crimes won't be able to afford bail, then more likely that they will then be willing to accept a plea deal, which is a conviction, than to fight the crime. There's one thing if you're walking around free for a year before you go to court. It's nothing if you're sitting in jail. And they say and then they say, hey, we'll also give you time served, right? So like the whole system is set up to create this reality, right? Or to create these things. And obviously there are individual choices involved in all of that, but I'm going on a tangent, Will. But anyway, so what do you think, again, on the next point she made, that police brutality is a myth, and then provide any stats to prove.
Which is a huge claim to make without ever looking at, like, literally you could spend, even if you're not good at research, you could spend the next 10 to 15 minutes and find academics at great university papers showing empirical data that her claim here is false, right? That racially motivated police brutality is a myth. That's just false. You already heard, we talk about the arrest and convictions, the way crime stat work, and the fact that the system's built to lead to convictions, right? But the other thing that's trickier when it comes to police brutality, right, is the way those things are reported, right? Most cities is built off this kind of police self-reporting thing. So it's easier to gain data on fatal police encounters, right? So if somebody dies, it's easy to gain data on that because they have to report it. Somebody's dead. And even then they don't report it well, as we just saw like an hour ago with the Breonna Taylor report that was basically blank. But that's a whole nother thing. Literally, the report's basically blank and you put a few rounds in her back while she's sleeping. But when you think about other parts of police brutality, right? Just unnecessary force. That's all supposed to be self-reported. Now, obviously, it's not, you're not going to want to report if you unnecessarily used unnecessary force and it wasn't fatal. Why would you report that as police, right? So these things don't go reported, which means there's no actual data for a lot of those things, right?
And even when there are complaints, so I know D. Ray McKesson and his group just did some studies, and they were studying different police departments. There are police departments around the country that have rules on board that say even complaints against the police are just basically the records are destroyed every year or every couple of years or whatever. So they don't even have long-term records on there, right? So we can't even go back and say, okay, well, you're not self-reporting, but let's see how often the community reported something, right? We can't even do that because so many of these departments are destroying those records.
Right. So the data becomes tricky because it's basically prevented from any data being created, right?
Right.
So when it comes to police brutality, right, this is why we've seen a rise recently because of the revolution of the cell phone camera, right? If these things aren't recorded, if George Floyd, if that incident isn't recorded, none of this happens, right? Because his report, equally, if you read his report from the police, is egregiously wrong from what we see in the video.
Yeah, it's wild. They said basically, they noticed he was struggling and then called an ambulance and then he died. It's wild. But
it's just like,
and we know that even when people do report that the officer that killed Officer Chauvin, that was most responsible for his death, he had 18 citations, right? But nothing is done to them. He hadn't been punished for any of them, right? I think maybe he had like a couple conversations. So there's no punishment, there's no record. And so, when we talk about doing things the right way, right? A lot of people are upset about the people marching and being in the street causing unrest. When people do things the right way and call the police precincts and say, hey, this happened, it's not right, nothing happens. Literally, there's another city, I think it's Philadelphia, or it might be Philly, where essentially they say if an incident of reported misconduct isn't resolved within a year, then there can be no punishment given down to the officer, right? So basically, if they drag their feet long enough, you can't punish the officer for misconduct. So so everything is set up against the people. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's all set up where there's no data, there's no accountability. So what are you supposed to do? That's why those are simple things for us to reform, right? But they don't exist, which makes it where you can look at data difference, which is why I think it's important when it comes to police brutality that we have to listen to the Black experience, because the data is being erased, right? And there's no accountability there.
Right. But even with the data we do have, right? Candace Owens threw out some like nonsense stuff, right?
With no source.
Right. And we know for a fact, right? And maybe we'll put sources in the show notes.
I got you.
But we know for a fact that Black people are 3 times more likely to be killed by police than white people, right? Yep. We know that they are also more likely to be killed when unarmed than white people are to be killed when unarmed, right? We know there's no correlation between the amount of violent crime in the area and police killings, right? So often they'll say, well, police are in a high, they're in a city with high crime, they're in St. Louis, and so it makes sense that, no, the numbers show that whether you're in St. Louis or San Francisco or name a city that's generally known for being safe, I don't know, Salt Lake City or something, I just don't, that there's no correlation between more, or at least a higher percentage of police killings and whatnot, right? There was a whole, I kind of cited the traffic stop study as well, where it shows that Black people are more likely, and Blacks and Latino folks, more likely to be stopped with less evidence than white drivers, more likely to be searched, but less likely to actually find something when searched, right? So it's just all the numbers that are out there show that this is pretty clear, right? It's and the only arguments that people have against this is, well, Black people commit more crimes. So on some level it's justified that these things are going on. And then again, we're speaking in circles because we simply go back to all of the things we talked about, all the elements that create the conditions to create more crime.
Let me give you a few more studies though, just to top it off, because there's literally tons of academic work on this. Tons of academic work on this.
Put some sprinkles on it, Will.
Yeah, let me just put it on top. So 2016 study, police accountability for the Chicago Police Department. And I believe this was after the Laquan McDonald killing when this got forced down. I might be wrong with that though. 2016, I don't remember what year it is. But they looked at 2008 to 2015, Black people made up nearly 75% of all shootings and killings by police in the city of Chicago. 75%, right? And note that population of Chicago is roughly 30% white, 30% Black, 30% Hispanic within the city limits, right? It's pretty even breakdown. And then 2012 to 2015, the same study, Blacks were over 76% more likely to be tasered, right? Which means if you're getting tasered, there's always those other force happening there with police brutality.
And just real quick, what's interesting about that, as you're mentioning with Chicago, like if you know Chicago, the most densely populated areas of the city on the north side, which is, I mean, there's diversity, but it's more white, right? That's where all the bars, the clubs, like I lived on the north side of Chicago. There's plenty of reason for heavy police presence. And to be fair, oftentimes there is, like you see a lot of cops on the north side of Chicago, right? They're out there. So the fact that so many of these shootings and taserings and whatnot are non-white folks as well. But go ahead.
Yeah, which means they're, south and west side, most of these things are happening, right? So it's over-policing Black communities, right? But then they also had in that study, they had a traffic stop study with it too. 2013, over 100,000 traffic stops, almost half of them were Black, and they only make up 30% of the population, right? And in that same study, whites were twice as likely to actually have contraband on them in the same study. So that's just the Chicago police. But let me add just 2 more sprinkles on here.
Sprinkle.
Rutgers University did a study that resulted in Blacks being 2.5 more likely to be killed by police, right? And there's literally been, like you said 3 times, right?
2.5
One study
times.
shows 3 times. All of them, nobody shows lower than two times, double, right? What it is for Black in general. And then you can break that down by gender as well, right? And then also, according to models on a Northwestern study, Black men and boys, this number is wild, so I want you to hear it, is in their lifetime, are 1 in 1,000 will be killed in their lifetime for Black men and boys.
By police.
By police, right? 1 in 1,000. Now, here's the number for white people, and it was pretty similar for all non-Black groups. 39 in 100,000 are likely to be killed. Like, that's a ridiculous number. And the second highest was like, I don't know, I think it had Hispanics at like 58 out of 100,000. So we're talking about, they couldn't even put it in the 100,000s, a completely different metric to measure how much more likely it is for a black person to be killed by the police. Like, these are just basic data studies, and there's tons of them.
Right. And you know what's wild about, especially when we start talking about unarmed folks, you know, I think people get this image of, oh, well, you know, black kids getting killed by the police because, you know, it's some quote unquote gangbanger, you know, and they, you know, it's some shootout like in the movies or whatnot. Like, you know, people do not threaten the police like that. You know, being a police officer is not one of the most dangerous jobs out there. You know, it just isn't. Because people don't shoot at the police. Like, and not only that, you know, I'm getting ahead of myself, but people, we're not out here. You don't see people out there marching when and if it even happens. Like, if some kid, you know, or some man opens fire on the cops and they shoot back and kill them, right? Like, even those of us who want police reform and wholesale change and don't like the way policing is and feel like, and we understand the true nature of police, even I still understand that, hey, if you are a cop and someone pulls a gun and someone shoots at you, or someone actually has a gun pointed at you, I understand that what happens often in that situation is you're going to shoot, right? Like, and
right.
I don't know how to phrase it if I'm okay with it, like, but like, we understand that, right? So people aren't out here marching for that. People aren't in the streets about that. People are upset when you see Laquan McDonald surrounded by 20 armed policemen and he has a kitchen knife wandering around in the middle of the highway with nobody within 20 feet of him, and they all just open fire on him. Right. Yep. These are all cops with vests and all that stuff, and they just open fire on him. Right? Nobody could get that knife out that kid's hand. Nobody could try. We're upset when Philando Castile says, "Officer, I'm a registered firearm owner. You know, the weapon is in the glove compartment," and they open fire on him. Like, that's the stuff that we're talking about. And there's enough of that there's a problem. So all of this stuff about who commits the crimes and all of that nonsense, it has no bearing on this, like the fact that they are shooting black people, men and women, and choking them and doing all. Eric Garner was not a threat to anybody when he was running. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is the stuff we're talking about. So I say that because I just think people get these images in their mind and they think everything, you know, we got too many cop shows on TV and they think everything is some dramatic situation where the hero needs to get home to his wife. And that's usually not the case in these situations.
Same with Tamir Rice in Cleveland. I mean,
right.
A 12-year-old playing in
bucking.
The 12-year-old playing in the park, and you see the surveillance video of it from there, and it's pull up within like less than 3 seconds, a 12-year-old shot.
Right.
Like, it's not, you know, there's no threats out here, I guess, in that sense, you know.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, you did mention police officers not being that dangerous a job. Candace does say something about that. She says, again, without a source, and I can't find a source that says this data, that a police officer is 18 and a half more times likely to be killed by a black person than the other way around.
Which I couldn't find. I have no idea what she was talking about.
There's no studies there. And if you just look at dangerous jobs, right, because cops aren't even in the top 10 most dangerous jobs, according to a government study, where trash collectors, lawn servicemen are in top 10 most dangerous jobs. Cops are not, right? And that's based off injury and killing.
Right.
So,
and here's the other thing about this, and this is, I won't go on a tangent, but one, cops act like they're doing the most dangerous job ever, right? Like, they make the decisions they make because if they don't, they're just at risk of being murdered every day, right? That's how many cops treat the job. But here's the thing. Lawn servicemen, right? We know that there are things that can happen there, but most of the time, people that are working, you know, in lawn service or whatnot, you know, that's a skill that they have or whatever, right? But it's not like you have a million options, right? It's not like you getting your PhD and you decide to go on the lawn service, right? There are other jobs that are skilled, like electricians and whatnot, that there's some danger because the thing is naturally dangerous. Most of these folks that are cops, my point is, they chose to become a cop. Most of the people that are cops, and granted, is not necessarily the best and the brightest, but it wasn't like, yeah, I can become a cop or I'm going to be destitute, right? Like,
That's
you
true.
usually had some options. So it was a choice that you made to become a police officer. Like, we all know people that joined the military because they kind of felt like, I don't really know what to do with my life, so I'm going to join the military, right? It was like, let's figure this life thing out and do this. Being a cop isn't necessarily like that. Right? Being a cop is not just, I don't know what to do with my life, so let me go join the academy. It's usually a conscious choice by somebody that has other options or other things that they could do. And I'm not saying they can, say I can be a cop or I can be a rocket scientist, right? But there's something else you can do. And so this whole, we all have to feel sorry for cops and this blue lives element. There ain't no blue lives. There are people that chose this career path, chose it intentionally, and this is what they wanted to do. They could have done other things. They wanted to do this, but now they want and this is where I get annoyed, they want us all to pat them on the back and be ultra sympathetic because their job is oh so hard. Guess what you can do if you're a cop? You can quit that job like any other job. Like, you can quit being a cop is so hard and stressful. You can leave the job. If you're jaded or whatever, do something else. Like,
and you didn't have that much investment in it, so it's not like you spent 10 years,
right.
8 years on an academic career to get to that. You got your high school diploma or a GED and went to a few months of police boot camp.
What's they paid for? You didn't go into debt to become a cop.
Yeah, so it's not like the leaving the job is, unfathomable.
Yeah, and that's this whole cult of policing and this Blue Lives Matter, like where we've turned it into something that it's not. It is it is not a job that you have to be in for life. It is not a job you're forced into. We acknowledge that on some level, for some legitimate reasons, it can be stressful, And so, we were going to talk a little bit about the police reform thing, but I've always said, look, we know like countries like Israel, they require their citizens to be to do military service for, I think it's 3 years, is it? Well, I believe it's a couple years, right? There are many options we can have for this policing thing. It's so hard that, hey, look, require, not that I'm saying, I was going to go real far, say, require citizens to put some time in law. But you only have to do that. You can say, look, our police forces are going to be community police forces. We're going to have officers that have lived in this zip code or whatever for X amount of years. So from the local high school, we'll hire 2 officers every 4 years, and you'll serve a 4-year tour duty, and we'll give you a little pension or whatever so that you got a little money to do something with later, and then we'll rotate folks out. So if it is such a stressful thing, if it gets you so jaded, if it creates this culture of us versus them, don't have it be us versus them. Let people patrol their own communities, right? Yeah. You could pay officers $70,000, for 4 years. There's plenty of kids fresh out of high school that'll say, I will police my community for a few years. You know what I'm saying?
And put in good training with it, yeah.
Right, and put in good training, and I'm only in 4 years and out, so like I don't have time to get as jaded or whatever. And I also know I'm not going to be a cop forever, so I might want to treat my fellow citizens with some level of respect. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just, I don't know. I feel like there's different options that are available if we choose not to look at them because things have just been the way they are. So we can rap about that another time.
Yeah, we'll talk about that maybe next episode, the whole defunding police idea and all the different reform ideas there are, because there's a lot of them. We just need to be creative and actually put some things in place. I don't know where we're at in the video. You know where we're at?
What you mentioned, the last thing you mentioned was that
I was giving
by a black person and vice versa, and
so that was still kind of debunking her thing that there's no such thing as racially motivated police brutality.
Yeah. So all of that's wild. There was no stats for that. That 18.5% more like that, we couldn't find that at all. So maybe we'll be able to find it later or something. But I don't know where she got that from. It seemed a bit wild.
She goes into black on black crime.
Yeah, so there's a few things she said, and honestly, I don't remember. I wrote them down. I don't remember exactly where she said them, but she started with this whole black on black crime nonsense, and
that's part of the script, man. I called that in the script.
Yeah, and look, I'm gonna say this because there might be people here that are listening that don't understand this, or if you're gonna share this with somebody that shared this video with you, which we hope you do, I want to be able to say this and kind of get this on record, right? But I don't talk about this often because it's pretty clear. There's no such thing as black on black crime. Black on black crime is a term that was created to create a narrative, right? Every stat we have on crime shows that people of all races, creeds, and colors commit crimes in the places where they live and where they operate. America is segregated. So most of the time, they are committing crimes, those that commit crimes, in areas of other people of their same race. Most violent crimes that are committed against people of the same race as the perpetrator. Meaning, when there are murders, when a white person is murdered, it is usually a white person that does the murder. Saying when a black person is murdered, it's usually a black person that does the murder, right? So this notion of black on black crime is a lie. You don't hear about white on white crime, Asian on Asian, like none of that. So it's not true. It doesn't exist. Crime is simply crime, right? Now, Candace Owens also makes the argument that, oh, well, basically black people don't, like, she says, like, we're our biggest problem because of black on black crime and we should be fighting against that. This is where, if you remember early on, I said she says some nonsense that only flies when she's talking to white America or Americans that don't know black folks, that don't know black experience, right? Why do I say this? Because every city in the country, every black neighborhood in the country has all sorts of programs, events, organizations, things like that, that are dedicated to, in general, things that improve the community. So whether it's after-school programs, education, tutoring, all these things that where the system has failed Black America, there are organizations within every community that is trying to do what they can to make up for these things. You know, some of the major ones like NAACP and the Urban League and all those, right? Every year, all over the place, there are marches to stop crime in these communities, right? There are people like in Chicago, the Peacekeepers, right? It is a group of men who they go out and they try to they try to stop confrontations when they happen. Somebody calls them up like, hey, these guys over here are having an issue. They go and try to stop confrontations so that it doesn't turn violent, right? There's Moms Against Gun Crime, whatever that name is, whatever the name of that group is. Black people consistently, everywhere you look, are out here saying, we are trying to lessen the amount of crime in our area. We're trying to fight crime in the area. We're trying to prevent murders and things of that nature. All of these other forces of poverty and lack of education, all these things are creating these environments that breed crime, and not just in Black areas, because the same thing happened in areas of white folks and other races. When all these things are present, they're just much more present in Black communities, right? And so we all know this. If you are either in living around Black people, if you've been in those areas, if you just talk to folks, you know that this is going on. Which is why I say this whole thing with Candace Owens and those that are sharing this is disingenuous, because it is easy. Google the name of your city, and you can in community organizations, you can find them all over the place. I grew up going to some of them, attended some of them, I knew of them. You know what I mean? Like, there are all sorts of organizations that I've been to and seen marches and all sorts of stuff that are about this very issue. So when people try to tell you, oh, well, Black people don't care about Black on Black crime, Black people need to fight, we have been. It's not on the news like that, and quite frankly, oftentimes that element doesn't involve other communities as much. So when I say, hey, my brown and white and Asian brothers and sisters, we all trying to come together on this, no, because it's usually about people literally in the communities where they live in fighting this fight.
Yeah, and that, I mean, you took my two biggest points. I don't think Candace has been to a Black community, because it's pretty evident every summer, right?
Right.
There's always marches against violence. There's always, especially churches, interceding in these things, like actually change it. So that's ridiculous. But the other thing to add on to that is that this is just a logical fallacy, right? Like to bring up even if Black on Black crime was a thing, which we just said it really isn't, right? Even if it was, what does that have to do with police brutality against Black lives, right? It's just a distracting side thing. It doesn't have anything to do with any logical argument, right? It's just a way to try and shift the conversation to a different place. Again, to devalue lives, to say, if there's so much Black on Black crime, then Blacks are criminals, and so on and so forth.
As if the police's job is now different, and you can kill Black people. Just because in general, Black people do X, Y, and Z. So now it's okay to do. No, you're right. It's
just a logical fallacy. It doesn't work. So It's
which a lot of stuff she said. But we are breaking it down in nonsense she says so that people can understand. And another thing she said, we don't take personal responsibility in our community. We blame white people. We just broke down all the different things.
She's never been to a black community.
Right. It's a lie. Now, you'll certainly hear people that will talk about the system. You'll hear people talk about the man and whatnot, right? Because it's real. Like systematic racism is real. We know it is, right? But people don't, this whole narrative that so many black people just sit around and say, well, I'm stuck. I mean, yeah, on some level, does that happen? Yeah, especially when you got a community that's basically been beat down for 400 some years, you have a lack of hope a lot of times, which is another thing that you pour that into that poverty mixture, and that creates things like crime and violence. Is a lack of hope, a lack of caring about yourself and others, right? That happens. So we won't deny that that's real, but if black people didn't take responsibility, all those things we talked about wouldn't exist, right? All these organizations and people that are volunteering their time, energy, and money. George Floyd wouldn't have been volunteering his time to young people and work in these different organizations and things that he did, if he didn't care, if, he wasn't about taking responsibility. He wouldn't have moved to Minneapolis to, start a better life if he wasn't taking responsibility, right? He just sat there in Houston or wherever he was and like, well, I guess this is it.
Well, even while he was in Houston, there was an article in Christianity Today about him literally being part of a church there, helping spread the gospel in Houston.
Right.
Like, that's a brother in Christ. Whatever he's struggling with, it don't matter, right?
Right.
That's crazy,
Yeah. So then she says something that I found just extremely hilarious. She said, black people, we celebrate our drug dealers. Now,
that is a funny one.
It is a funny one. So I'm going to start off by, we'll take her at face value here. Is it true that there are quote unquote drug dealers in the black community, and that so much of the quote unquote black community exists, you celebrate it? On some level, yeah, right. On some level, we talk about rappers that have talked about the drug, the drug exploits and whatnot, but we don't celebrate them because they sold drugs. We celebrate them because of their music, and so as much as you celebrate an artist, right? People just enjoy their music. In local communities, there's sometimes infamous drug lords and whatnot, and I guess the people, are they celebrated? I don't know if they're celebrated. Maybe within a small segment of the population, but they're not really celebrated. They might be known and infamous. Sometimes you'll get things like a movie Paid in Full, which talks about like Rich Porter and folks like that in New York, or you'll hear about like the Black BMF, the Black Mafia family out of Philly. And so, within certain circles, those people get a little bit of I guess, infamy, right? However, Will, drug dealers in America are celebrated in general, in general, right? Some of the most popular movies that have ever been made in this country, Scarface, starring Al Pacino, about a drug dealer. Goodfellas, starring Robert De Niro and other white folks. Al Pacino and whatnot. Drug dealers. Casino, drug dealers. Godfather, some of my favorite movies. These folks dealt drugs.
And part 2.
Yeah, well, actually, they actually talked about staying away from drugs. A big part of the plot was getting into drugs, literally. And this was in the 40s, right? So, Chris Rock, no. It was either Chris Rock or Dave Chappelle. I can't remember now. They're nothing alike in terms of comedians. I think it's Chris Rock. He said white people are the only group that are allowed to profit from pain, right? So we have also like the most popular TV show of the last 20 years, at least in terms of critical acclaim and all of that, is The Sopranos, about New Jersey crime bosses. So when white folks celebrate criminals and whatnot, it's perfectly okay. There's all sorts of heist movies, Ocean's 11, right? Mainly white folks creating crimes. It's okay. It's entertainment. We celebrate them, whatever. Some of these are about real people, right? Let's not get it twisted. Some of these are a lot of them are based on real people. Matter of fact, the what's it called? The Irishman that just came out on Netflix last year. Like the 4-hour movie with De Niro and Pacino and Joe Pesci and all of those guys. was about the mafia and corrupt union bosses and hitmen and all of that. It's perfectly fine. But some black folks like put, the name of some Harlem drug dealer in a rap song, and now it's a problem. Now we're the only community that celebrates our drug dealers, as if we didn't just off the top of our head name 5 different movies, TV shows, whatever that everybody knows and is familiar with. That are
literally hundreds,
right? That are about drug dealers and criminals and all those things, and then not one of them black, except Don Cheadle in Ocean's 11.
Like, he ain't even the main guy. Yeah.
Right. So that's some nonsense. So that's one of those. That's one of those you're talking out the side of your neck type of statements. But people hear that they act like it's true.
Yeah, they're not, and you don't even have to think hard about that either. I mean, saying that like Breaking Bad, super popular TV show about a white guy getting his life right through making meth. Like, there's just tons of them, and it's ridiculous.
And let's name the black show that's popular that deals with drug dealers and whatnot. The Wire, right?
That's true.
The Wire showed a very realistic depiction of it. It showed the negatives of drug dealers. These main character drug dealers being killed or being put in jail or whatever. They didn't have happy endings, right? Yeah. So when it is black folks, most of the time there is some level of come down, or like they're brought to their knees a little bit. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's not there are very few elements of black entertainment and black music, or outside of music, but black shows or whatever, where the criminals, the drug dealers, whatever, are successful or just get away, or it's done with some sort of levity, right? So it's deadly serious, So yeah, it's nonsensical, but I say this because again, I want people to make sure that they're thinking about that, because you and I, we know that it's nonsense, but a lot of people I think hear stuff like that and they're like, yeah, that is true. Yeah, Jay-Z sold drugs. Yeah, we celebrate Jay-Z. And they don't think about the next step. So make sure, and if you're sharing this with people, tell them to actually think about these things from both sides.
Yeah. Yep. I don't know what else to say. She's still got wild stuff.
So look, I'll go down my list if you don't got nothing on there.
Go down your list and I'll comment. Yeah.
Yeah. So she said something wild. Where she said, basically, if you want to make George Floyd your hero, go ahead and do it. If you want to put him on your wall, go ahead and do it. I'm not going to do it. He's not a hero, essentially. My hero was Kobe Bryant. I'll celebrate Kobe, and you celebrate George Floyd. One, that was weird and random to me. Like,
it doesn't even make
Kobe
sense.
Bryant was your hero? Like, are you a young basketball player? Or like
well, I think she could say that, right? Because with him being gone, right, he couldn't call her out on her BS.
Well, and I really honestly will. I thought like that. This is definitely pandering. Like, you're only saying Kobe's name because you feel like you'll get some points, or it shows some level of authenticity amongst your audience. Supposedly, like that's the plan, right? But here's the thing: you just got done slandering George Floyd all this time, talking about he's not an awesome person, and R.I.P. Kobe, but Kobe wasn't an accused rapist. Kobe did spend the majority of his career saying things like, I don't need friends. Friends when I retire, and alienating his teammates and berating people. Like, Kobe was a mini Jordan. He just didn't win quite as much as Jordan, right? Nobody accused Kobe Bryant of being a good person until after his retirement, the kind of last few years, when he began to kind of calm down and make himself.
Yeah, he had a shift in things, yeah.
Yeah, and maybe that was strategic, but, I did think, did seem like Kobe had some, got some perspective in life or whatever. And ultimately did seem like, a pretty decent guy at the end of things, right? But you're a grown woman. If Kobe Bryant's your hero, it's not because of what he did the last 2 years of his life. It's because of what he was doing when he was playing, if you're being genuine. And for the vast majority of that time, Kobe Bryant was unabashed, unapologetic jerk, who had been accused of rape. And so for her to get up there and use that as an example, I just thought was absolutely wild. And I'm like, you're just talking out your neck now. Like, you really are. So,
I mean, it's just, I don't know, it's egregious to me, man. Like, that doesn't make, it's just so obvious that you're trying to, like, find some way to cater to, like, it's not even connected. It just doesn't make sense. I don't know.
No, it was wild. I just thought it was a real hypocritical
statement. Because I'd be because she would never say it if Kobe was still alive.
No,
she would never say it because Kobe would call like something that blew up like this.
He might. I don't know. I don't know if Kobe spoke a lot of.
I guess I can't say anything for Kobe, but
He
obviously, you know,
yeah. And
they
I'm
don't have
actually
any
surprised.
repercussions doing it.
Well, and here's the thing, though, it really wouldn't matter because again, even if Kobe spoke out, the people that will hear Kobe and agree with him are not the people she's talking to. You know what
That's
I mean?
true.
Like she's talking to a different audience, right? And speaking of, the audience she's talking to will take this statement she made and believe it. So our biggest problem is us. We don't talk about it. Now, again, I say Candace Owens. I don't know what you mean by we, right? Like she
Who's us?
just definitely does not seem to be part of the quote unquote black community, right? But that's also a doggone lie. It's a bold face, flat out, blatant lie. It's like what this will run at some point. We talked about earlier. That's had a 2-hour conversation that will run at some point on the Wild Wild World network here. Next few weeks with a brother where we talked about things like this, right? Things like crime and things in the black community and things that black people can do to better their situation. This is a constant conversation, a constant thing, and it's those conversations that create the organizations that we talked about, that create the rallies and marches for peace and the after-school programs and the tutoring and things that we discussed, right? Like, that's what it is. People talk about this all the time. The black community has never just sat back and been like, oh, well, white folks did this to us, so I guess we're stuck. Nah, I mean, again, maybe a few select folks, but in general, the black community has always, literally since its existence, been having discussions and figuring out ways to better our situation as much as we can. So to say we don't talk about it is a lie. I can't say that strong enough. It's a straight up lie. It is an absolute lie. I don't know of any black people that haven't had this conversation, right? And I'd be interested if you're black and you've never had this conversation with somebody or whatever, let us know, because pretty sure every black person has had this conversation multiple times. Like, what do we need to do? Because I often say there's a macro and a micro. The macro level is the systems that are in place and all that. The micro is your individual life and the decisions you make despite whatever those systems are, right? And what can we do in the micro to make our individual lives better and the lives of our direct community better? And it's a regular thing. People talk about it all the time. So I'm going to say one last time, that's a bold-faced lie. And that's how you know she ain't talking to black people. Because she couldn't say that in a room full of black people without getting laughed or booed out of the room. Impossible.
Yep. No, that's facts. I got nothing to say on that.
Nothing to say. I will look, the last quote I have, and I'm sure you might have some other things on it. Last quote I wrote down. Actually, it wasn't even a quote. It's her whole rant at about like the 17-minute mark about coon, the word coon, right?
Oh, yeah.
She talked about, is Ben Carson a coon because he was a surgeon? Is Kanye West a coon? Right? Now, this is a little bit of talking, in mixed company. That's the same, right? Because, a coon is a term that black folks use for other black folks that are usually doing some Uncle Tom nonsense. Because I know I use a slang term to describe a slang term.
Right.
But essentially, what a coon is somebody that either has kind of turned their back on black people or is specifically working against black people, black progress, black freedom. In ways like Candace Owens is doing by making false arguments, false statements that are, essentially designed to stoke the fires of white racists, right? That is coon behavior. It has nothing to do with your intelligence, right? The reality is, if Candace Owens wasn't intelligent, we would never talk about her, right? Because she's doing what she's doing in a very intelligent way because it's reaching the audience it's intended to. So I say that because I think there will be white people or non-black people that see that, and this, if all they're hearing is Candace Owens, right, and especially if they're not aware of who she is, they'll be thinking, oh wow, black people really just, I guess they diss other black people that disagree with them. It has nothing to do with people disagreeing, right? It has nothing to do. Black people don't all think the same. There are many different opinions about what we can do to better society or whatever within the quote unquote black community. But being a coon has nothing to do with intelligence. It has nothing to do with disagreement. It has everything to do with you blatantly and purposefully going against your own people. When I say your own people, what I mean is the betterment in general of black Americans, which is the nonsense she's doing, right? Yeah. It's not just, I kind of disagree, and I think police brutality isn't as big of an issue because I think we can do better and like there are people that can have opinions that I disagree with, and it's not being a coon, it's you just disagree, right? Me and a coon is what she's doing, and being out here, kind of shucking and jiving and being the token to be brought out there to appease racists. And people call Kanye a coon when he was out there, not only just wearing the MAGA hat, but saying things like slavery was a choice, right? Mm-hmm. That's coon behavior, not just disagreement, right? That's what people talk about. So if you see black people call Candace Owens a coon, it's not because we disagree with her, and I didn't even use that term towards her, right? It's not because she's intelligent, not because she just is a part of the hive mind. No, it's because it's like if a woman got out here and was like, you know what? The reason there is, and I don't even know if I believe in the term rape culture, but the reason there's rape culture is because all us women getting molested are asking for it, and we just got to do better, right? Like that's essentially the equivalent, and I don't even want to use any other examples before I mess around and accidentally offend somebody. But it's just coming out there and saying so blatantly against your group, you know what I'm saying? Like that's what it is. So I'll leave it at that. But please don't be fooled with the nonsense she's saying.
Yeah, no, that's real. That's real. I don't have anything else to say. It was long. That was an 18-minute video we had to go through. But I think the big key, right? We want to lay this out for you, make it easy for you. But the big thing is that we can't. Social media is, it's a double-edged sword, right? Anytime you see stuff, you need to do your homework. You need to spend time actually thinking. We need to, actually call people to truth, right? And this is one of those things where everybody who's sending, most people sending, some people are sending me to just see my thoughts on it, not necessarily that they agree with it. But if you're going to send this as a source to support your already cultural beliefs, you don't actually care. You don't actually wrestle with it.
And when you hear this or anything else, even like anything else that is tickling your ear, just make sure that like what they're saying is actually true. Right. Exactly. Make sure that what you're hearing is truth in terms of if a number is being thrown out. Double check the number, right? Like I've kind of been in this world for a while, so I know I don't know every percentage down to the decimal or to the hundredth, but I know most of these kind of general facts and about where they stand, right? So when she says some nonsense like black people are 18 and a half times more likely, but like okay, that doesn't sound right to me, right? But if you're not familiar with this stuff, don't just take what somebody says because it sounds good, right? Sound like when you're in church and the pastor says, don't take my word for it. It's here, like, read the word. Like, they're not just, some of them are saying it because it's, preacher talk, but it's true. Don't take their word for it. Check it for yourself. So just because somebody sounds passionate or whatever, just because they seem
sounds
like
intelligent and throws numbers and stats out. Yeah.
Or is emotional, whatever, it doesn't mean that it's true. And I'm saying that no matter what side of the aisle you fall on, because Candace Owens got out there and she's very smart. She made it seem like this was an off-the-cuff video, right? And she was holding her hand. I'm pretty sure I wouldn't be shocked if she spent, 4 hours, preparing this or whatever, right? But she made it seem like it's off the cuff and she's passionate. And if you already are kind of in agreement, you're like, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Make sure the things she's saying is true. We're in the age of Google. Figure it out, right? Google yourself. Or, hey, talk to somebody that disagrees and see if, there's something you're missing. That's what I hope we did, was give you a little bit of insight and background if you don't have that, or if whoever you're sharing that with doesn't have that. So I hope this was helpful in some way, shape, or form before I go back to not ever talking about Candace Owens again.
This is the end of that conversation, but hopefully it's helpful to you. We'll be back for another episode. This is episode 9 of season 3. We'll be back next week, probably in the same lane. We'll see. I don't know. We might bring some stuff back. You never know.
You never know.
Next week.
All right. Appreciate y'all.
Yep. Peace out. Wild Wild World. KingdomDreamer.com. Follow us on Twitter. Connect with us. Give us those rates and reviews. That helps us out. But appreciate y'all.
Peace.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Wild Wild World Show. Make sure you subscribe, rate, and review.
Follow us on Twitter at KingdomXDreams and learn more at kingdomdreamer.com.